اوكي، احنا الان طبعا الشيء بالشيء يذكر الاجتماع الجلسه هذه يعني بدات بمداخله مهمه لصديقنا دكتور غاري سك، وهو يعني ربما كان من افضل الاشخاص الذين تم اختيارهم للبدء بقضيه العلاقات الخليجيه الامريكيه. وهذه الجلسة هي متابعة يعني مع متحدثين متميزين. طبعا كان عندي في 4 لكن الظاهر في 3 ما أعرف. Rory is not here. No, he's not here. dual containment يعني اوكي as the word goes. فبالتالي الان الحديث اصبحت الولايات المتحده الامريكيه هي تكاد تكون العضو السابع في مجلس التعاون الخليجي، فموضوعها يعني أصبح مهم. والحقيقة بالنسبة لي شخصيا يعني كان لي تجارب كثيرة على أرض الواقع، سواء في العراق، في الصومال، بالذات في يعني. وغاري سك تكلم عن قضية بعد تحرير الكويت ما حدث فيها. أنا في ذاك الوقت كنت أسير في العراق في السجن في جنوب العراق يعني. وأذكر جيدا وبعدها فاست تراك إلى 2003 كنا في مهمات إنسانية في العراق، وشاهدنا الحقيقة التضارب والتخبط الأمريكي على أرض الواقع، مش من الكتب ومش من المراسلين على الأرض. في الصومال فحتى عمل على الصومال منذ فترة طويلة ونستطيع أن نفهم أو لا نفهم الحقيقة. ربما الباحثين والمتحدثين المتميزين اللي معنا على البانل سيتحدثون لربما توضيح الصورة وإجابة على الأسئلة كثيرة، الإجابات قليلة، الحالة متغيرة. ونبدأ إن شاء الله دانيال نتكلم عن العوامل الرئيسة في العلاقات الأمريكية الخليجية وتحدياتها كثيرة.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be back in Doha, and I'm most grateful for the opportunity to talk with you this morning. Energy supply has long been one of the key factors in U.S. Gulf relations, along with nuclear nonproliferation, terrorism, and support for regional allies. But these other factors have risen in salience to the United States recently, preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons, defeating ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other extremists, and enabling Israel and Arab allies to defend themselves from conventional and unconventional Iranian power projection. The Gulf remains important to the U.S., but the reasons have shifted in the decades since the dramatic oil supply crises of the 1970s. There are good reasons for this shift. U.S. energy imports have declined in both quantity and importance to the U.S. American production of oil, natural gas, and renewables is rising even sharply. American oil imports are falling and diversifying, and the energy intensity of the U.S. economy continues a very long-term downward trend. In addition, preparations for an energy emergency are very well developed, including a strategic petroleum reserve with more than 90 days of imports, as well as coordination with other International Energy Agency members. As Stephen Metz recently put it, petroleum will not be weaponized. Moreover, the unipolar moment is finished. The U.S. now faces a military, political, and economic peer challenge from China, as well as regional military challenges from Russia and Europe. The Americans are feeling the strain of more than 2 decades of major interventions abroad: Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Syria, as well as other places. Their European, Canadian, and Japanese alliances are fraying. The federal budget deficit is soaring. The Americans, frankly, are tired of carrying burdens for others and anxious to reduce their own, especially in the Middle East, as Gary has already suggested. This was no less true of President Obama than it is of President Trump, who in the past few days wondered out loud whether we needed to stay in this region now that energy has declined in importance. Retrenchment, even if not the explicit policy, is apparent in American handling of Syria, Libya, Iraq, and other Middle East issues. What are the implications of these shifts for U.S. Gulf relations? How will the U.S. adjust its Middle East policies to this new reality? And how can the Gulf countries respond to protect their own interests? A colleague and I, to examine these questions, first had a look at the U.S. Energy Information Administration's annual energy outlook, published in 2018, this year, and then at the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook, published in 2017. I won't go over the whole analysis, but emphasize here only the bottom lines. The annual energy outlook suggests that natural gas and renewable energy will increase their share of total U.S. consumption as coal and petroleum consumption fall. All but 2 of the scenarios suggest the U.S. will become a net exporter of energy. The shift is driven by a large increase in LNG exports. That increase may be moderated by a small rise in net imports of oil. The dependence of the U.S. economy on energy looks likely to continue its long-term downward trend. In the reference case, the energy intensity of the U.S. economy will reach nearly half of current levels by 2050. It's already been halved since the 1970s or so. The World Energy Outlook is largely consistent with the American version. It foresees a shift of global demand towards Asia, with China and India fueling growth as demand falls in the U.S. and EU. But China's growth in demand is slowing. India will be the primary driver of demand after 2025. In the short term, the U.S. is expected to experience unprecedented growth in both oil and gas output, accounting, according to the World Energy Outlook, for 80% of the increase in global oil supply before 2025. Those are dramatically changed facts of the energy situation that simply cannot be ignored. So the U.S. will likely become a net energy exporter and remain such for a decade or so. It will still be vulnerable to an oil supply disruption that increases prices sharply, but much less so than in the 1970s because of the decline in the energy intensity of its economy and because of increased preparedness. That will be true even if the U.S. were to remain a net importer, which is possible, and even if Hormuz remains a choke point. Lowered vulnerability will give the U.S. reason to look to others to share more of the burden of protecting Gulf energy supplies. You've already heard about how we were a reluctant hegemon to begin with and slid into the role. We're now trying to slide out of the role, in my view. Estimates put U.S. government spending to protect the Gulf at some truly extraordinary figures. 8 trillion, according to one estimate from 1976 to 2011. We're still spending, according to the Ray Corporation, something like 12% of the Pentagon's budget in support of the Carter Doctrine. The Americans are already urging the Indians and Chinese to increase their holdings of strategic oil stocks, which is very important, otherwise they're freeloaders on our strategic stocks. They could also press the Saudis and others to increase the capacity of existing pipelines using drag-reducing agents, as well as building new ones that circumvent Hormuz, as well as the now threatened Bab el-Mandeb. In my view, military means are of dubious utility in reacting to oil supply shocks because their deployment in a crisis tends to raise rather than lower prices. They are most useful in routine preventive patrolling. The Americans could reasonably look to the Chinese, Indians, Japanese, and South Koreans to join in protecting the flow of oil through Hormuz, as they consume most of the oil. The Chinese have already conducted joint naval operations with the Iranians. I think it's much better if they were to conduct joint naval operations with other consumers, and they, along with the U.S., India, Japan, South Korea, and others, participate in multilateral anti-piracy efforts in the Arabian Sea, efforts which could provide a framework for international cooperation in the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not suggesting surrendering Hormuz to the Chinese, but I am suggesting that there's no reason why the Chinese should not be helping to protect it. China and India would likely be amenable to this proposition. A 2015 white paper elevated Chinese interests in the far seas, saying China's national security is more vulnerable to international regional turmoil, terrorism, and piracy. The security of overseas interests concerning energy and resources, strategic sea lines of communication, as well as institutions, personnel, and assets abroad, has become an imminent issue. That's what the Chinese are saying about their own problem. Now, the question is, how should the Americans react to that? Some people say, well, we should react competitively to that. I think that's wrong. The reason I think it's wrong is that the American issue with the Chinese militarily is not in the Gulf. It's in the first island chain. If the Chinese, and I've talked to my very conservative colleagues about this, if the Chinese want to develop a blue water navy that helps to protect Hormuz, that does not create big problems for the Americans unless it's done in a way that is inimical to American interests. Much better to have them doing that than to have them developing their navy more fully in the coastal region, not just their navy, but also their artillery and other military capabilities. China, of course, has its first military base in Djibouti. India has responded by increasing its own presence throughout the region. The creation of a multilateral force to patrol inside the Gulf and Strait with both Chinese and Indian participation, perhaps under a UN flag, could de-escalate tensions between them and significantly lessen burdens on the U.S. The U.S. will, in any event, want the Gulf states to increase regional cooperation to rationalize and expand the pipeline network and improve Gulf military cooperation. The GCC has basically been unwilling to move in this direction, and the current Gulf conflict makes it unlikely they will do so soon. But preparations of this sort will be vital if the U.S. were to seriously consider military action against Iran, since Tehran would almost surely, I think, retaliate against Gulf oil and gas facilities. Let me try to talk about the Gulf perspective, though, of course, that's up to you, not up to me. The Gulf Arabs, Iraq, and Iran in my view, should view Chinese and Indian participation protecting the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz in a positive light, so long as it's done in a way that is relatively neutral and decent, done in a competitive way. While their military capabilities are not equivalent to the U.S., no Gulf oil producer is going to want to attack navies from its main customers. The Chinese are not being foolish to cooperate with the Iranian Navy. So long as China and India do not align with either the Arab Gulf or Iran, but instead keep their oil supplies diversified, an attack on oil shipping in the Gulf is unlikely. Growth in Asian markets for oil and gas will favor Gulf producers with the capability to get products to market reliably and at lowest cost. Increased reliance on interstate pipelines to and through politically volatile areas could either drive cohesion because of shared economic interest or fuel conflict by giving both state and non-state actors powerful tools for leverage. But I do think the further development of the pipeline network is something that would be desirable. The emergence of the U.S. as a net energy exporter means that Gulf suppliers will find themselves in competition with the Americans. They already do. This will be especially important in the LNG market, which in the past has been dominated by long-term contracts signed at prices well above pipeline gas. In both Europe and East Asia, U.S. LNG will likely bring down prices, enable consuming countries to diversify supplies. At the same time, suppliers will try to lock in markets with dedicated pipelines, including from the Gulf through South Asia. It's not only oil and gas, though, that are issue, it's also technology that's an issue. Growth in the use of renewables and use of advanced recovery techniques will not be limited to the U.S. Advanced recovery will spread to other producing countries, including in the Gulf. It will be most tempting for those that do not have more easily exploited reserves. Bahrain is known to be considering options for its large shale oil deposit. Likewise, solar and wind technology is penetrating European, Middle Eastern, and Asian markets. Sanctions on Russia and U.S. hesitancy about technology transfer to China could limit the spread of advanced U.S. recovery and alternative technologies in those directions. The Gulf, Europe, and Africa are likely to be more attractive markets for U.S. technology. Let me conclude. Current events can be misleading. They include an American commitment to staying in Syria indefinitely, by which I mean literally indefinitely. We don't know how long it will last, and apparent determination to continue U.S. patrolling in the Gulf. But people throughout the Middle East doubt American resolve, and I think for very good reasons. The U.S. simply does not have the same interests in Gulf oil and gas supplies it had in 1980, when President Carter declared that Washington would keep the Strait of Hormuz open in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. That threat has disappeared. The vulnerability of the U.S. to oil supply disruption has declined, and the means of preventing a global spike in oil prices have improved. U.S. interests in the Gulf today are focused on countering Iran, not on protecting oil supplies. Gulf Arab and Iranian responses to this changed situation, I think, need to be recalibrated. Gulf Arabs should reduce their reliance on U.S. military power, both by improving their own capacities to deliver oil by circumventing Hormuz, and their capacities to protect Hormuz from attack. They could also participate in a multinational force if one were created that includes major oil consumers like India, China, South Korea, and Japan. It's not irrelevant that Iran should welcome such any reduction in American presence in the Gulf, as well as the buildup of a multinational force to protect the Strait. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir for I forget.
I would like to apologize for not presenting the bios of the speakers just to gain time because you haven't in the booklet that is distributed to you. Now we move to Marwan Bishara, who is well known to all of you, and he will be speaking about the Gulf States-U.S. relations in search of a paradigm. Thank you. I think this one cannot translate paradigm into Arabic.
To speak in English, unfortunately, because over the last 3 decades or so, I've done most of my research in English about this very particular topic. So really, اللي يعني الشعور القومي ما بتحمل لها ربع ساعة. Just for the sake of academic accuracy, as it were. I'm basically guided in this sort of meeting, especially in the spirit of the room we're in, by trying to engage in a dialogue rather than lecture on you about this very specific topic. And maybe in the process I'll forget a few of the points I have in my paper, but then you can always read it later on. As I said, I'm guided by a number of things whenever I speak about such issues regarding the United States and the Middle East. One is that you may be original and correct in what you say, but you're most probably, if you're correct, you're not original, and if you're original, you're probably wrong. So much has been said about this issue that it's probably hard to come up with something new. And the challenge in a paper like this is maybe to shed a light in some form or another that helps understand the essence of the relationship and hence the search for paradigm. The second guiding point I have usually about things of this nature, again talking about U.S. Arab, U.S. Middle East, U.S. Gulf relations, is the degree of what Princeton philosopher Harry Frankfurt will call bullshit. In his theory on bullshit, he explains why when there is so much passion and so much need to say something new about a subject, we can no longer stick to the facts, so we stick to our own version of things, not necessarily dependent on facts. And there's been so much bullshit in discussing U.S. relations, and I think the ultimate statement of bullshit that tends to define most of what we talk, especially nowadays, in the words of President Trump, as well as in the past, I would argue, is that this is a very dangerous region in turmoil. As if there's something genetically dangerous about Arabs or about this region, as if there's something in Arab nationality or in Islam that drives this region to be different than anywhere else in the world, and hence this is a very dangerous, and no matter what the others, foreigners, do in this region, this just tends to be a dangerous region, and hence the others would like at this point in time to leave the region to its people. Well, I think this is the ultimate bullshit statement about Western and Eastern relations to the Middle East. And this takes me to the heart of what I need to say here, which is the search for paradigm for U.S. Gulf relations, and in extension U.S. Middle East relations, I would say, which is the fact that the relations between the United States and the Gulf, like the United States and the rest of the region, were born out of two realities. Reality number one is the post-colonial era, when many of the Middle Eastern countries gained independence. And two, the Cold War era, when the Soviet Union and the United States competed over areas of influence throughout the world, and especially in the Middle East, and more especially in the Gulf region, where it was, of course, as we all know, strategic in terms of being a leading exporter of energy in the world. And hence, the lubricator, the driver, the machine, the engine that would help the prosperity and the industrial progress in the West and throughout the world.
So then, to try to define that paradigm that's born out of two realities which are predominantly realities of power relations, not some sort of value system, not even at the earlier stages some sort of economic expressions, but rather born out of power relations, Cold War and the post-colonial era. And I think to try to find the appropriate model, the analytical framework, if we will, if not paradigm, the conceptual framework to understand the relationship, I think at least four main characters need to fit into this paradigm. One is asymmetry. Asymmetry means that there is a major difference of qualitative and quantitative of power between the two partners, Gulf states on the one hand, the United States on the other hand. The disparity of the capacity, the asymmetry, is an important character of this relationship. Meaning this is not like NATO relations, for example, NATO alliance between Western European countries and the United States, where this is more relationships of parity, even if it's not perfect parity, but relations of parity. It's also not like Gulf relations or Gulf Cooperation Council, where it is again, in so many ways, a relationship among equals within the one area, even if one of the parties is asymmetrically bigger, in this case, Saudi Arabia. The other characteristic is that this is a consensual relationship, meaning this is not a relationship that's been imposed by one party over the other. This is not a protectorate where one, as the British did during the colonial era in the Gulf region and elsewhere in the Middle East, where they forced their will on, to be states in the region within the mandate era, within the colonial era, and hence impose a sort of protectorate status on a member region, including others in the Gulf. So this is not protective. These are relations between Gulf states and the United States on the basis of consensual agreement, meaning the Gulf wants it as much as the United States wants it. Three, that this is a relationship based on mutual benefit. This is not meant to benefit one party over another party, that both parties need to benefit from the relationship. And in fact, the success of this relationship is based on the fact that both parties need to benefit. If they don't, and since it's based on consensual agreement, then one of the parties will simply walk away. Hence, it has to be always mutually benefit for both parties. And fourth, and as I started with the inception, that this is a power relation. At its heart, a power relation, a relationship of power between a weaker, smaller, less in size partner, a junior partner, let's call them, and a senior partner with no capacity, notably military capacity. Because here what we're talking about, as I said, is not simply an economic, a moral, this is not a church mosque, this is not a religious affiliation or relation. This is a power relation, and hence power, strategic, military, security, and economic tends to play a major role in defining it. So what will then be the model that will involve those four main elements? And let me add a couple of more, just for the sake of the discussion, is that the model also needs to take into account things like unpredictability that tends to define the relationship between the United States and the Gulf in a number of levels. For example, when after the 1973 war, the Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states led a sort of an embargo of sort against their own senior partner, the United States. Again, 9/11 is also considered by some as another point of unpredictability. When the Saudi Arabia and Gulf states vote against the United States at the United Nations when it has to do with the Palestinian issues. So there are issues that don't exactly underline compatibility, they don't necessarily underline agreement on all sorts of issues, and where a senior partner is not able to dictate to the junior partner what to do. I think the other way around also works. The United States, in the sense of the relationship, also tends to have relationships that are not, or were not, in the past at least, agreeable to the Gulf partners. For example, its strategic relations with Israel. and at one point before with Iran, even in the early 70s and so on and so forth. So there are various characteristics also that needs to be taken into consideration when trying to find that model. So looking at the various models that we know in international relations, whether it is, as I said, protectorate, whether it's dependency relationship, whether it's, as some would like to call it in places in Europe, in their analytical framework, mafiosi relationship, and other forms of relationship of parity, like in NATO, or in harmony, like in the Gulf Regional Council, at least before 2017, I think we end up with one very, very, very old model. It's a model that is to be borrowed from the Roman Empire, Roman Republic / satellite states. And that very old analytical concept, framework paradigm that was modernized throughout the centuries and decades, it's the patron-client relationship. Patron-client relationship is misunderstood widely as something not what it is. In Arabic, the best possible translation I could find is kafil-wakil relation. One guarantees the security of the other. The United States guarantees the security and the well-being and the sovereignty and so on, independence of the Gulf states, and the Gulf states in return help the United States in various ways, including ensuring the free flow of oil, investing petrodollars in the US economy or Western economy, so on and so forth. All sorts of potential contributions by the Gulf states towards the United States, the guarantor of Gulf security, and so on and so forth. Here, if I may add, in this patron-client relation, although I agree with much of what Professor Gary Sick said earlier, but I would say things might have started on a reluctant basis in the 1970s with the United States involved, paralyzed by the war in Vietnam, and later on under the Carter administration, because President Carter was a very particular kind of president that really was not about to do or carry the various policies carried by the Truman administration and MacArthur. All right, and then the 1950s U.S. policies towards the Soviet Union. But I think by his rapid deployment force and the so-called the Carter Doctrine, I think it paved the way for all sorts of doctrines that did not show reluctance. They showed aggressive intention by the United States, even after the Cold War, to get involved in the region. Eisenhower, thank you. And so in so many ways, somewhat between the British colonial era, French colonial era, and later on the American Soviet, let's underline Soviet, because they also had quite a destabilizing and counterproductive role in the Middle East. I think the emergence of patron-client relations was a defining character of the Middle East. A number of states, so-called republics, were clients of the Soviet Union. That includes Yemen at one point, Syria, Iraq, Libya, etc., even Egypt at one point. And the others became more of patron clients with the United States, Gulf states, other monarchies as well. In the beginning of it is right after the Carter administration, Gene Kilpatrick that was a professor, became an ambassador, the UN ambassador for the Reagan administration, divided the Middle East countries into authoritarian regimes, authoritarian states, and totalitarian states. And the authoritarian became what they call them the moderates, meaning the monarchies, and so on and so forth, and the totalitarians were the republics. And the United States would be the patron for the authoritarian regimes. And again, here what's interesting is that there was no real attempts for the United States to democratize, liberalize, and drive the relationship to a more societal level with its clients, just like the Soviet Union also gave up on that idea. And that's why the relationship was really based on power and interest rather than on any value system. And it continued to be so. to conclude, why is all of this is very important? It's all that because now we have, or we could have, an analytical framework that helps us then understand the ups and downs of the relationship, what happens, why it happens, when it happens, and even, if possible, to make predictions about the relationship moving forward. And do so while breaking away from the moods of the moment and the one particular official here or there. And I think, in a sense, what happened, and I think the Gulf countries, certain Gulf countries, I might add, like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, had paid close attention to how Israel defined and shaped its relationship with the United States. And at one point, the UAE, especially Saudi Arabia later on, tried to imitate Israeli patron-client relationship with the United States because it was a very successful one. And as I said earlier, since this is not just a question of domination or control or protectorate, the client, like the patron, has huge area of maneuver. And I think in the case of Israel, arguably in the case of Saudi Arabia, what one not so great academic have termed it, the tail wags the dog, meaning it is the client that defines the relationship more than the patron was able to define the relationship. I think in the Israeli case, where there was a very particular advantage for Israel, among others, its strategic advantage over its neighbors, its rise during the Cold War, and of course, underlying, of course, the Jewish and Israeli lobby, including the Christian evangelicals and so on and so forth, the United States that helped Israel its relations. UAE and Saudi Arabia in later years tried to compensate for the absence of that sort of a lobby in the United States by what the Roman Empire called nomenclature, which is the sort of the name callers, meaning those who went around and said, this king from Mauritania today, meaning like North Morocco, Algeria, part of the Mediterranean, or the herald of Palestine, these are great allies and so on and so forth. So UAE and Saudi Arabia and others tried to build a network of lobbyists and law firms and others in the United States that would help them with the decision makers in Washington in order to define the relationship. And there were a number of times, a number of occasions, and again, this is very characteristic of patron-client relations, is that deception becomes part and parcel of it. Why? Because if you want the patron to be more protective of you and more helpful to you, sometimes you deceive your patron by saying, well, I am overly insecure because there is too much aggression against me, or because there is this neighbor of mine that is not behaving well and we need to clip their wings and so on and so forth. So I think over the last few years, we've seen with the UAE and Saudi Arabia in particular, tried to follow in the footsteps of Israel in trying to reinvent the patron-client relations in a way where they are able to shape the relationship. I think that sort of backfired, at least last year, especially when the deception was revealed for what it is, especially against Qatar, and notably in the war in Yemen. But the relationship continues, and it continues to endure, and it continues to have those sorts of tensions between the patron and the client. But I think moving forward, this will serve as a great analytical model to understand those ups and downs and unpredictabilities within the relationship.
Thank you, Marwan, for taking us back so far, and that makes little Sparta concept more relevant, possibly. Now we go to Ross Harrison. Please, you have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm waiting. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'll just need a minute to pull up my PowerPoint.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say that it's an honor to be here with you today. I want to thank the Arab Center for hosting me here, and also for your patience in listening to my talk. I hope to be engaging with many of you over the next couple of days, both on the content of my talk and also the content of the areas that interest you. I think we're just about there. I think it's important when we're looking at foreign policy options, either of states in the Middle East or the United States, my country, to look at those options in the context of an appropriate analysis of the region that we live in here. Oftentimes in the United States, when we look at policies toward Iran or toward Saudi Arabia or Israel, we do it with scant regard for an analysis of the region as a whole and what impact our policies have on the nature of the region and the nature of distribution of power in the region. And as you will see, at least towards the end of my talk, this is problematic both for the region and deleterious for the United States. The topic that I was asked to write about and speak about is a new balance of power in the Gulf region, the U.S. role and response. I'm going to challenge the premise of that topic and be a bit provocative, hopefully, today. Number one, provocative in the sense that we are in a balance of power situation. I don't believe we are. I don't believe we're in an emerging balance of power situation, and I would even challenge the notion that a balance of power situation should be the goal or objectives of U.S. foreign policy. And so the best way for me to do that is sort of take you back a little bit to my early university days and look at what we mean by balance of power. Balance of power theory sort of gained currency as a cornerstone of classical realism. And classical realism essentially, there's different interpretations of it, but classical realism essentially said that states in an international system or within a regional system will be power maximizing entities, and they will, until they run up against or come up against some kind of countervailing, some kind of opposing force, they will maximize their power. And the idea is that within that kind of balance of power system, if there is some kind of equilibrium, in theory there should be some, at least modicum of stability, and in the best case scenarios, perhaps some cooperation because of the lack of alternatives to cooperation. Those are some of the tenets of classical realism. What I would like to do is look and see whether some of the assumptions behind classical realism actually comport and align with the realities of your region, and I would argue that it does not. So we're going to sort of unpack some of these assumptions. I think it's important to say at the outset that balance of power theory and classical realism was really the cornerstone of international relations, one interpretation, rather, of international relations theory. It was never meant to be predictive of state behavior necessarily, and it certainly was not supposed to be a prescription on state behavior or foreign policy, and clearly should not have been incorporated in any sort of ideological framework. And that's something that in Washington today we see it being embedded ideologically, and it is essentially a description and an insight about how systems behave, not necessarily at one particular state or one particular region. So let's look at some of the assumptions behind classical realism and then measure those against the realities of the Middle East. One is state centricity. When I studied international relations, seems like 150 years ago, but in the 1970s, 1980s, we were looking at states as the basic unit of analysis, or at least the system was the unit of analysis. We were looking at states as the major contributors to the international system. Today we have non-state actors like ISIS and Daesh and Al-Qaeda and regional development banks and multinational corporations. When we were starting to study the Middle East, essentially the main units were the states themselves. I think that's an important piece of when we're looking at the contours of an international system and a notion of a balance of power. We were looking at state centricity. And the reality of it is the Middle East is a bit of a degraded state system today. Not that we don't have powerful, viable, sovereign states, but as you know better than I do, we have had a degradation of the Arab order with the collapse of the region into 3, arguably 4 civil wars: Yemen, Libya, Syria, and Iraq hopefully is in a post-conflict zone that we've seen over the last number of years. Iraq also deal with a destabilizing civil conflict and civil war. So what we have is a degraded state system, and at the very best, maybe a region in transition. Balance of power theory does help us understand regions in transition, certainly how regions adjust to imbalances of power, but I don't believe it helps us really well explain the tumultuousness of the region we're in today, because the major problem and the main source of instability in the region today are not necessarily strong states, but it's the fragile states and the weak states and the failed states that are undergoing the most conflict, and they are the ones that are drawing in the regional powers into a sort of death spiral or conflict vortex, I call it, in the region. So the region really doesn't match a classical balance of power situation today. If you want to see how balance of power theory has worked its way into the think tank world, and I happen to work for a prestigious think tank in Washington, so I'm not certainly casting aspersions on think tanks, but you can see that here we have the states that are aligned with Iran, the states that are aligned with Saudi Arabia, and they position this as a balance of power situation. It's not. Essentially, there's two different axes or poles within the region of states that are aligned with one of the major regional powers or the other. And by the way, Turkey should be in that mix. It's not. But Iran, and they essentially call it a balance of power in the Middle East. And words matter. I think it's a difficult nomenclature when we describe the situation, assume that we're talking about a balance of power situation. And in reality, I would argue that there is an imbalance of power in the Middle East today. We are not moving towards a balance of power. And it's not because of a regional hegemon. It's not because of Iran. It's not because of a reluctant United States. It's essentially the result of a failed state system, or at least state failure in parts of the Arab world that both the Arab countries, strong states like Saudi Arabia, like Iran and Turkey are projecting power into. And I think it's important at the outset when we're diagnosing the problems of the region to be clear. And in my view, we tend to view, at least the view from Riyadh, is that Iran is sort of this regional hegemon breathing down the backs of the Arab world. Descriptively, that might be correct, but analytically, it's poor in the sense that Iran benefits. They have a particular set of skills and asymmetric capabilities that enable them to benefit from the chaos. And particularly the chaos that is sowed inside what I call the soft tissue or soft underbelly of the Arab world, which is the failed state system I've been talking to. If you redress some of the problems that are in that Arab political order, Iran's capabilities might become slightly less, at least the power that the capabilities they're using to project power currently. Assumption number two, and this is a bit controversial, and others in the room might argue with me on this, and that's fine. I intend to be a bit provocative. And assumption number two is we're dealing with a symmetric, the balance of power is symmetric capabilities of states. And I'm not suggesting we're talking about quantitative symmetry. I'm talking about qualitative symmetry in the sense that when we're looking at states, the states in the balance of power system have the ability to calibrate their power relative to their adversary. When we look at, this is just a diagram of the U.S. and Russia, and you can see on many grounds here in terms of capabilities, the U.S. trumps Russia. But that's not the point of the diagram. The point of the diagram is they're measuring power vis-a-vis one another using the same metrics. And when we're looking at the region today, particularly when we look at Iran, and I'm sorry if I'm spending a lot of time talking about Iran, but I think it's an important actor, and it's important that we look at balance of power, that we at least consider Iran in the equation. Iran is using asymmetric means, which are well aligned with the chaotic situation that's besetting the Arab world today. They're not thriving because of necessarily their conventional military capabilities. So they have a mismatch in terms of we have a lack of parity, but we also have a qualitative advantage that Iran has, a qualitative rather, advantage that Iran has, not because it has the same set of capabilities that Saudi Arabia or the UAE has, or even the United States has, but it has a particular set of capabilities that it's evolved over time. You probably all recognize this man, Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Al-Quds Force. Their power is projected heavily through their alliance system of Shia militias in Iraq, the Hashd, in Syria. You have the Pakistani, Afghan, Iraqi militias aligned with the Al-Quds force and also Hezbollah. And so they're projecting power. I think it's very clear to say they're projecting power not between states, they're projecting power within the states. And they're not necessarily, the threat of Iran is not that it will necessarily invade or attack the territorial integrity of any of the Arab states. It's that it's achieving some kind of regional prominence within the current environment in which we're in. And if we look at Iran's conventional capabilities, this is not a perfect picture of the asymmetry of conventional capability in Iran and Saudi Arabia, but you can see along most metrics, but not all, when we're looking at conventional capabilities, the balance is really in favor of the GCC countries, in particular Saudi Arabia. It's not in the ledger, side of the ledger of Iran. And the nature of the challenge for Iran is not territorial. There's little real threat of interstate aggression unless Iran, as been said by, I think, Dan earlier, unless Iran is attacked, the likelihood of them closing the Straits of Hormuz or attacking us or attacking Saudi Arabia is de minimis. Assumption number 3 is that states of balance of power, states will maximize their power by clustering. If there is an imbalance of power in the region, then alliances are formed. And that's a basic tenet in order to counterbalance an imbalance of power and return the system to some form of equilibrium. The reality, that's the theory. Theory does not comport with the reality. The reality is that Saudi Arabia has weakened the Arab flank, unfortunately, by creating divisions within the GCC. And what has happened, it's caused what's known as bandwagoning. Instead of creating a front against Iran, it has caused Qatar to essentially move closer to Turkey and potentially move closer to Iran as well, underlining the basic balancing that is in theory to be taking place and sowing further divisions in the Arab world, which only benefit what is seen as a regional aggressor, which would be Iran. So the reality of it is, in some, not quite in some, in terms of the analysis, I'll get into U.S. options in a few minutes. In reality, the Middle East is more of a power aggregation system. It's not a balance of power system. One of the issues is in this current situation that I described, where competition is taking place inside the civil war zones of the Middle East, it's very difficult for states to calibrate their power vis-a-vis one another. And what that means is that states will tend to overcompensate, and where escalation becomes more rational than de-escalation. And that's a function of the fog of war, and particularly the fog of civil war. So we're in a situation, we're not heading towards a new balance of power. In many ways, we're heading towards, and I believe the Trump administration, even though Rory and others have said that the Trump administration is really, to some degree, a continuation of the Obama administration. In my view, the degree to which it is tilting so heavily towards Saudi Arabia is ultimately going to cause not a balance of power, not a de-escalation of conflict, but is going to move the region into more conflict. U.S. response to this. Notice I put U.S. strategy in quotation marks because I believe it's policy, but I do believe that policy is decoupled from strategy. In this case, the United States has come down very hard on the side of Saudi Arabia and on the side of Israel, with the objective of containing Iran. And the Arab NATO, the MISA, Middle East Strategic Alliance System initiative, which has gotten currency in some quarters in Washington, but not typically in the Defense Department, is an example of this, where we're using our alliances essentially to counter and contain what we see as a threat from Iran. In some quarters, it appears, I grew up during the Soviet era, it appears as if we're defining Iran as the new Soviet Union. I can tell you, Iran is not the new Soviet Union. It might be causing, or it is causing regional concerns today, but it is not the new Soviet Union, and therefore it is not an interest of the United States to contain Iran. It might be a derivative interest to contain Iran, but there is a broader interest, and in my view, the broader interest is that no longer what starts in the Middle East stays in the Middle East. What starts in the Middle East quickly globalizes in terms of speculative terrorism, actual terrorist acts, refugee flows that have changed the political discourse of Western Europe and arguably the United States. The United States has an interest in stability in this region. So the notion of one of the questions we have to ask is if we're looking at containing Iran using our alliance system towards what objective? And some have argued that this is a form of offshore balancing. Offshore balancing is kind of a modern, new kind of rendition of realist theory, that essentially the United States, if there's an imbalance in the region, the United States, instead of getting involved directly, will tilt towards its allies, enable its allies to deal with that imbalance and return the region to a more stable balance of power. As I think I've conveyed to you, at least from my perspective, there's already an imbalance of power in the region. On the asymmetric side, it's obviously Iran, it's in Iran's favor. On the conventional side, it is on the GCC's favor. And how is the United States essentially tilting heavily towards Saudi Arabia and Israel, much more on the conventional side? So it's really not an offshore, it's a distorted offshore balancing kind of an approach and not particularly effective. So treating Saudi Arabia and Israel as not just exceptional allies, but exclusive allies is problematic. We've had exceptional alliances with Saudi Arabia and our Gulf allies for many years, and we've had a strong relationship with Israel. We'll see whether the Khashoggi affair will change that, but unlikely it will. That's fine. Exceptional relationships are fine. Exclusive relationships on behalf of a zero-sum kind of agenda is not. Because what's it going to do? It's pushing Iran already to move closer to Russia, and Russia and Iran have problematic relations on many fronts. Well, we're essentially giving Iran and possibly Russia an incentive to move closer to one another, and we are incentivizing Iran to dig in deeper into its own set of capabilities and where those capabilities best applied in the civil war conflicts in the Middle East, which is the major contributors to the instability that that I've identified earlier. So what should the U.S. be working towards? In my view, with Iran, neither the extreme positions of engagement nor containment will work. Engagement without pressure is unlikely to work with Iran, and containment without engagement is also unlikely to work, which is the zone we're in currently today. Something like engagement, sort of a hybrid of the two, is more realistic but unlikely, given the closing of the diplomatic track with the U.S. renouncing of the JCPOA. Exceptional alliances are fine, but making them exclusive to push zero-sum agendas is not, particularly since the U.S. interest should be, in my view, some form of stability in the region. That's counterproductive. Where prudent and where possible, work with Russia and the broader international community. And at some point, and I know I get daggers thrown at me when I say this, at some point in time, a security architecture will be necessary to stabilize the region. We are far away from that today. So in sum, to finish up, the region isn't a balance of power system, it is a degraded state system or a region in transformation. No country, including Iran, is in a position to become a regional hegemon, but Iran's capabilities happen to match the chaos of the moment. We need to ask the question of how counter-Iran serves U.S. interests. The U.S. now has an interest in regional stability, given the globalizing effects of Middle East disturbances. Realist approaches like offshore balancing don't work in a system of failed states, and also don't work in a post-unipolar moment, where Iran, Russia, and others, China and others, could ultimately start lifting up the other side, and you have a ratcheting up of conflict, not a balancing situation. The current approach will likely ratchet up instability and competition, and the current approach will likely cause Russia and Iran to close ranks. As a non-paid announcement or marketing, I'm going to at least mention, speaking of security architecture, a book that my good friend and colleague Paul Salem, who is the president of the Middle East Institute, came out with last year, and Dr. Tony Koidsman actually was contributing to this through a very excellent piece on military security. To be clear, this is not a book that's pushing regional cooperation. In fact, it's a very pessimistic book looking at what the challenges of cooperation are. But it is an important document, I believe, and I we look forward to your comments about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess we had very intelligent and provocative presentations from our three distinguished presenters. No bullshit. I can assure you no bullshit. Well, no bullshit in academia anyway. But it's a lot of food for thoughts. But I'll just throw one idea and then open the floor. In 1977, we were in the brink of another Third World War, but the location was Somalia. It was on the port of Berbera, and now the port of Berbera is coming back again in different capacities. I can tell you that the Horn now has at least 5 new military bases. 2 of them are from UAE, 1 Turkey, 1 China. So there is new things that are not being put on the table at all. There is a huge militarization in the region that is not coming from the ordinary, so to speak. So I would hope that maybe in the discussion later on that something like this will come up. Now I'll open the floor but please be brief. We are short in time, so please each one just present their name and question and decide which speaker is to address to. Thank you.
I'll make it very quick. My question is a remark to Mr. Daniel. It's regarding the Chinese becoming a blue water navy. In the Gulf, to us, they did become blue water navy since they became part of the CTF 150, 152. That was 20 years ago. And you mentioned they're not blue navy yet. Thank you. I have three quick questions. My first question to our friend, Professor Serwer. Are we talking now about the reality of internationalizing Gulf GCC security by less confidence in the United States, lesser footprint? The region is not as significant in terms of energy-wise, and there is also hesitation using force of push comes to shove. What is the reality of internationalizing Gulf security? As for my friend, China does not have blue water navy yet. So this is very good. Have only one used Ukrainian aircraft carrier. So we're building one. From our friend Marwan, I still not clear about your paradigm for a message. How would it work from our perspective? The patron-client relationship, is it really sinking in still? The United States position is less clear and hesitancy and lack of confidence. What do you think that? And I also a friend, Dr. Harrison, we're talking about, you mentioned that Iran could not become a regional hegemony. But what is the salient argument to convince the Iranians that this is a futile attempt? Because in their mindset, they believe they are working to become a regional hegemony through their asymmetrical power, through their proxies, and undermining the Arab security. And the problem with what we're talking, I agree with the degrading Arab system here, is because of lack of an Arab project. that does not put cooperation as a top priority. It's rather the state preservation of the rulership and the elites is the #1 priority for the state actors. And how about the non-state actors? As you mentioned, Al-Qaeda, Daesh, Al-Nusra, Al-Hajj, and others that undermine the Arab state system in particular, and have become more powerful than the state itself, like Hezbollah and things.
Dr. Yunus Muhammad from the Ministry of Defense Strategic Center for Study. I have two questions, in fact. One to Dr. Marwan Bishara. I understood from your presentation that the American Gulf relations are consensual according to their mutual interest, and there are no strategic relations. The question then, what will happen to the military agreements between the GCC countries and the USA? Are they null and void, or according to the American point of view? The question now is to Mr. Harrison. Can the United States get the militias out, the Iranian militias who are in Syria and Iraq? Can they kick them out? Because these are the external arms of Iran working in this country, and without needing that the Iranians use their own forces.
شكرا جزيلا. Thank you for the presentation. Just have three quick questions. Khalil Anani, the head of politics and international relations program at the Doha Institute. I just have three quick questions. The first one is about we have been always believing that one of the key assumptions of the U.S. Gulf relations is that the U.S. has leverage always on the Gulf, but under Trump administration we see the opposite side of this. We see some of the Gulf countries, they have leverage over the U.S., particularly in the Khashoggi affair that when Trump speaks about that he cannot afford to lose the Saudi Arabia because they give money to the U.S. So it seems to me that the Gulf countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, has leverage on the U.S., at least from this kind of perspective. The second point is that since the Carter Doctrine until now, we keep talking about the U.S. as stabilizing force. Actually, it's the opposite. The U.S. is one of the key stabilizing forces in the region, frankly, since it led to this kind of army race in the region. And each time we think that the U.S. would try to stabilize, actually it's the opposite. I don't know if this is a deliberate kind of action or it's not. I mean, it might be linked to the purchases of American weapons to the Gulf countries to have this kind of industry going on. The third question is about the Trump kind of foreign policy in the Gulf. Is it Trump who decides how the U.S. should go with the Gulf, or is it the American establishment, like the Congress, State Department, Pentagon? Because we see some sort of divergence, particularly in the Qatar blockade. Trump adopted a very unstable and aggressive position from Qatar in the beginning, but then he started to shift to be more a little bit of balance. So who decides for the U.S. foreign policy in the Gulf? Thank you.
Radwan Ziad Arab Center. I have two quick points to Professor Harrison. First one regarding Turkey, how Turkey actually fit into the system, since actually Turkey is a rising economic power, and mostly has a good relationship with both parties, the Saudis and Iran, but always imagine itself as emerging regional power. And the second question regarding the offshore balancing. I wrote something about that because the U.S. does use it, especially to contain the civil war in Syria. It used it with Iran and Turkey. both countries actually, they intervene, but at the same time contain the civil war in Syria. Because this is why the offshore balancing it's been used, at least in the last 6 or 7 years, as a very effective U.S. strategy to keep the civil war within Syrian territory. Thank you.
So my question is for Professor Serwer. Don't you think that there are other dimensions in the relationship between the GCC and the U.S.? For instance, the sense of insecurity that the GCC feels is also shared by Israel. So U.S. policy should take into consideration that Israel also in that triangular relationship.
Thank you very much. My name is Saeed Abodia. I am the director of the investment group in Qatar. Just 2 words, I just wish to underline the importance of what Mr. Rory, Professor Rory has said about the about the importance of the transformation that is happening in the energy sector. I am Jordanian. 5 years ago, Jordan put up solar plants. The charge per kilowatt hour was 12.5 Jordanian piastres. The last one, after 5 years, was 1.5 Jordanian piastres per kilowatt hour. Dramatic increase, and all by Chinese companies, by the way. So the number 1.6 is very close to what Qatar is actually selling to its industries. So you can see the transformation that is rapidly happening in renewable energy and replacement of the importance of oil in the region. Qatar is currently expanding its LNG to compete, like we said, with the Far Eastern markets. It's anticipating to go in 4 years to up to 110 million tons per annum, and hopefully to sustain itself for a long time to come. However, the changes are coming. The Europeans and everybody has put 2040 as a target year to replace cars with electric cars, etc. I'll go there. My question is, now that we have to a certain degree a Russian mandate in Syria, quote unquote, could there be an opportunity for the Gulf regions and the Arab world to reach out and readdress the relationship with Russia, to try to fill in a gap that is being created by the withdrawal of the US, and to bring a new sort of balance against Israel? Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me. Munir Ghanem from Palestine. My question, two parts to Mr. Marwan. You spoke about American Gulf relations, that they are based on friendship and mutual interest. How could this be true in light of what we all heard from Mr. Trump, saying that the Gulf states are countries that would not exist wasn't for the American protection, and otherwise they would disappear? And then what is said about the America's withdrawal of their interest in the region because of their focus is now not on the energy of the region. Is this true, or this only a well-studied strategy to hand over the American role to Israel in the region, so that Israel becomes an important and strategic ally, and to change Israel from being an occupation country, but to become an important factor that will
On the question of is it realistic to expect a more multilateral approach to Gulf security, consider the alternative. The alternative is a gradual U.S. withdrawal that leaves a vacuum, and we know that that's a bad approach. We know how badly this works for the last 10 years in various Middle East countries. So, from my point of view, a more multilateral approach is a categorical imperative. If you're going to have security, that approach has to be adopted. I don't mean to suggest that this happens instantaneously or quickly, but that we should begin building in that direction. On the question of who decides in Washington, this reminds me of the diplomats who come to Washington thinking there's a lot of power there. And then they can't find the power because it's very divided with Congress, as the administration, different parts of the administration. The fact of the matter is that, yes, we have a lot of power, but we also have a system that intentionally has divided power and balanced power. So, you're quite right. It seems to me that Trump came down hard in favor of the Saudis' establishment, including in that word Secretary Mattis and others, came down hard against the blockade, and we now have a sort of non-policy towards the whole thing that it's a little bit difficult to understand, and that's pretty common when it comes to U.S. foreign policy on issues that are not really vital to us. And frankly, the GCC conflict itself is inimical to American interests, but it's not a vital question for us. Anybody who wants to depend on the Russians in Syria is welcome to Trump. I think that's been a proven bad road to go down.
Thank you. Marwan, please.
I think this is working, right?
It's working. There is no Russian involved in there. There is no Russian. Here, all Russians are
Just for that, in the spirit of dialogue, I would say I would trust Russia and Syria as much as I trust the United States in Iraq. Just for the sake of dialogue. I think that's one of the main problems that we've had throughout the years, is that the United States, for many, was actually a chosen patron, especially because the Soviet Union was not a better patron. So for many conservative, many liberal governments, societies, and so on and so forth, communism was not conducive to this. What rather really was liberals, and that's one of the most interesting paradoxes of US-Gulf relations, is that they are very, very different societal and governmental systems. We have monarchies and conservative systems here, Muslim, while in the United States we have something different. And I think that's why I will try to answer all the questions I had by just re-emphasizing some aspects of the analytical framework I present. Because what I present is not a definition. I'm not defining US-Gulf relations. Because when you define, then you have to provide a very accurate, specific description. What I try to do is give a framework. And in the framework, I think it is possible to understand the various changes and the various shocks and the various complementarities and incomplementarities in the relationship. So I think the patron-client relation, what it succeeds to say, again, to remind ourselves, is that this is a power relation, it's not a value system. Two, that it is consensual, and one party can walk away from the relationship. And three, there is mutual benefit. And four, it is asymmetrical, not nadine. It's asymmetrical, not متكافئة, غير متكافئة. So because it's asymmetrical, one is a dominant party and the other is not so dominant. The non-dominant party, the smaller, the junior partner, continuously try to define the relationship to serve their interests because they are bigger party. Kissinger used to say, patron-client states scream so hard and so loud against the United States by the degree of their dependency on the United States. Sometimes when Israel shouts and says we're not banana republic and so on and so forth, just recently someone else said we're not banana republic, it's basically to say that they are so dependent on the United States strategically. So in terms of the relationship, it is very strategic. The relationship is very strategic, but within the relationship, and I think that's what's so interesting about the so-called model, is that there is room for flexibility within the consistency. There is room for shocks within the non-surprising and harmonious model that just continues to move forward. So from the 1940s onward with Saudi Arabia, from the 1970s onward with the smaller Gulf states, the relationship continued unabated. And while at certain times there were tensions, and certain times there were disagreements, and certain times there were major disagreements on questions that are important to the Arab world and to the Arab Khalij, such as Palestine, there were big tensions within us. And as I said, in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and others would actually vote against the United States in the United Nations, for example, or they would form alliances in contradiction to U.S. interests. So, all in all, this analytical framework simply helps us to understand those phenomena in U.S. Gulf relations that sometimes seem strange, weird, unpredictable, because within this framework we can see in this disparity of power and yet consensuality between the U.S. and the Gulf states, they make a lot of sense.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to take one of the easy questions first, so they were all good questions. In terms of Trump, Donald Trump, does Donald Trump sort of speak for the United States? He clearly does. He speaks for the United States. But oftentimes, the machinery of government, there's a certain path dependency. And I think Gary Sick mentioned that this morning in terms of the U.S. policy towards the Middle East. It's not Obama redux, but it is there's certain strands of policy that are continued. I think what's important to understand, I had a friend recently that said that ignore what Donald Trump says, just watch what the government does. And I think that compartmentalization is problematic because words do matter. They matter domestically, and they matter internationally. States follow what we do. They perceive. States will make their calculation not just on the basis of what we do, but what they think we're going to do in the future. And I think Donald Trump's pronouncements do have an impact. So my counsel would be watch what the government does, watch what the Defense Department does, and how policy proceeds incrementally, but also don't discount Donald Trump's words. In terms of, does Saudi Arabia have more leverage in the relationship with the United States than the United States has over Saudi Arabia? I think the answer is no. I think we have to be clear that leverage, if not used, in this case, leverage is really not used. Donald Trump, I think we've seen the Trump administration gives a lot away without getting a lot in return. I think we saw that with the move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and I think we've seen it in terms of the Khashoggi affair. So I think we do have a significant leverage, but we've decided not to pay the cost and absorb the trade-offs of using that leverage going forward. Can the U.S. get the militias or Iran out of Syria and Iraq? I would argue no. If you talk to Iraqis, in many cases, they have not, the question of demilitarization and getting rid of many of the militias, they've said, don't do that too soon. They play a role in terms of cleaning up after Daesh. And we want to be careful not to demilitarize too soon until we can create some kind of internal balance. In Syria, there have been some red lines established by Israel, but I think if we understand the degree to which Iran has penetrated the Syrian infrastructure, you have Syrian forces that are in some cases embedded within the Syrian military establishment. So a clean exit of forcing Iran to sort of scamper across the border and go back and leave Syria, I think, is highly unrealistic. In terms of Turkey, Turkey had a very high-minded foreign policy until the Arab Spring, zero problems with neighbors. Now they're kind of in a zero neighborhood mode, no friends. So I think at one point in time we tended to look at Turkey as a balancer, as a way to bridge the gap between Riyadh and Tehran. I think being mired in Syria has reduced their potential, frankly.
and particularly the way in which the U.S.-Turkish relationship has evolved. In terms of convincing, this is the last, convincing Iran to behave differently, I think it's very, very complex. I think if we understand something about Iran's foreign policy, it's based upon opportunity and also threat. And as I argued in my talk and in my paper that's forthcoming, that what we're doing is increasing the threat perception of Iran and giving them a disincentive to disengage. If we look at how decisions are made in Tehran on the Syria file and the Iraq file, it's not coming from the foreign ministry. It's coming from the Pasdaran or the IRGC. And essentially what we've done is reinforce their position vis-a-vis the United States and strengthen their position. So the likelihood that somehow we are going to be able to, that we're creating a positive incentive for them to leave Syria and Iraq, I think is foolhardy to suggest. And as I said before, I think there's a supply and demand dynamic here, and the supply is what Iran is willing to do, and the demand is the civil war, the conflict zones of the Middle East, and the more we can do to create stabilization or deal with the tensions inside the civil war zones will do a lot to dry up some of the opportunities that Iran sees in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I appreciate your cooperation. Both all our distinguished speakers proved to be that they are experts, finished in 3 minutes. So now you have set the time for coffee break. Thank you.